Right, it's that time of year again, isn't it? We are a couple of days away from the start of the Premier League season, which means one thing and one thing only, and that is it is time for my Premier League predictions. But let's just be honest, right? If I get more than 2 or 3 of these correct, I've probably done pretty well. If I look at my predictions from last season, I predicted Man United to have an underwhelming season on what they had done the season before, so I can take a little bit of credit for that one. I predicted the City, Arsenal, Liverpool top 3. I somehow fluked predicting Fulham to finish in the exact position where they did, and I also put Sheffield United rock bottom, which I'm sure most of you lot did too. However, I also predicted Chelsea to finish 4th and get Champions League football. We weren't actually far off, to be fair. I predicted Luton to stay up on the final day of the Premier League season, and in case you lot go and dig out the video, I might as well just hold my hands up and admit it. It's a bad one. I predicted Burnley to finish 11th last season. What the fuck was I thinking? But if you go and check out your favourite YouTubers' predictions, I doubt they did that much better than me, or I doubt they were that interesting. So I'm going to give it a go, but let me just give it a little bit of context here, and let me just get my excuses in early. What a lot of people will do is they'll wait for the transfer window to finish, and then they'll do their Premier League predictions, but I don't want to do that, because I feel like that is a cop-out, because by the time the transfer window finishes, or closes I should say, there's going to have already been a couple of games played, and you're already going to be able to see where the strengths, where the weaknesses lie, and you're going to have an indication on who might have a good season. So I am going in blind. There could still be multiple transfers that could change everything, you know. Had Cole Palmer have signed for Chelsea 4 or 5 games earlier, I think we would have finished 4th. Had Forest not signed Callum Hudson-Odoi and a few of the signings they made, I think they may well have gone down. And had Man United not signed Sofran Amrabat on that deadline day, not much else would have happened. But what I'm saying is, transfers are relevant. Right, rock bottom, I am putting Southampton. I'm sorry, Saints fans, you're not going to like it. And I do have some very fond memories of you guys in the Premier League. You've produced some absolute ballers over the years. So maybe, just maybe, you could do the same thing this time round. You could keep hold of some of your key players. You've done a little bit of business. Harewood Belez from Man City. I don't think he's ever played a Premier League game, to be honest, but also kept the likes of Adam Armstrong, Carl Walker-Peters. That will benefit you, but your manager is 38 years old in Russell Martin, and to be honest, he's hardly proven in football, let alone proven in the Premier League, so I just can't see past Southampton getting relegated. In 19th place, I have gone with Leicester City. Now, we know that Leicester City are 99.9% sure to get a points deduction in this campaign, and if they were to get a points deduction and still stay up, like Everton did last time round, then they would have done so well. But regardless of a points deduction or not, I actually don't think that Leicester City's squad is equipped to deal with the Premier League. Unless they make some more signings, Vestergaard, Connor Cody, some of the centre-backs they've got at the club, I just think that Premier League opposition will rip those boys to pieces. Now, they do have some decent players. Fatawu, I think I'm pronouncing that right. He got a lot of assists in the Championship last season. He was a good player. Buenanote, who they've signed from Brighton, he's a good player. Obviously, Mavididi, he is decent as well. But other than that, obviously, an ageing Jamie Vardy, I do see a lack of Premier League quality, you know. They let go of Iheanacho, Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall's gone to Chelsea, as has their manager Enzo Maresca. I don't know. With that squad and the points deduction, I do think I'm going to have to put them in a relegation zone. Right, people, I'm going to do something different here. I'm not going to give you my last relegated team next. I am going to give you the team that just escapes relegation. So in 17th place is Ipswich, because I cannot do 3 up, 3 down. It is just so boring. The league's boring enough with Man City winning it every single season, and I do not want to sacrifice the chance at us being able to get excited over a relegation battle this year. And I think out of the 3 promoted teams, they do probably have the most quality and therefore maybe have the best chance of staying up. They could come up and they could be a Swansea when they first come up. Fulham, Brentford, I remember Wolves, they came up and finished really high, didn't didn't they? They could be one of them ones, or they could just be the same as Burnley last year and get absolutely played off the park. So I could be very wrong here, but if I'm going to back any of them to stay up, which I do need to do, can't be doing 3 up, 3 down, it's going to be Ipswich. And that then moves me on to 18th place. And I have got Bournemouth. Right, I know this is a big shout. I know it is. But I can't look past the sale of Solanke. I think that is going to hit them hard. And unless they go out in the transfer window and sign someone that can guarantee them those goals like Solanke did, I really, really think that they're going to struggle. If you take away Solanke's goals last season, they would have been the second lowest scorers in the entire league. And I understand, before you get in the comments, that is not how football works. You know, you took away Harry Kane's goals from that Tottenham side and they ended up scoring 4 more in their first season without Harry Kane than they did in their last season with Harry Kane. So I do understand, but I do just look at them and think they're going to struggle for goals, man. And I also do see a lack of quality and a lack of depth in that Bournemouth side. Iriola, he had patchy form, but if you look at the runs of form that Bournemouth had, it would always be Solanke who was scoring the goals in those matches that they won. So maybe they'll find someone else to do it. Maybe I'll be wrong. Probably will be wrong, let's be honest. But that's who I'm putting as my last relegated team. In 16th place, I've gone with Nottingham Forest. They've flirted with relegation for a couple of seasons now. But when I look at their squad, they've probably got just about enough to stay up, haven't they? Morgan Gibbs-White, Anthony Elanga, Callum Hudson-Odoi. They've got some good players. However, if one or two of those were to get injured, they could find themselves in big trouble. Their home form's good. They are hard to beat at home. I think I'll just about have them staying up. In 15th, I've got Everton. Now, they have lost Amadou Onana, and that will be a big loss for them. That does concern me. The Dele Alli redemption arc never worked out really like I was hoping it would. And there are rumours that they could be losing Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but let's be honest, he's hardly that prolific, is he? So they do need to do some business, but I don't know whether or not they can. One thing I do know is they have brought in Jake O'Brien from Lyon. I didn't really know him, but he's 6'6", and I'm guessing they're going to pair him with 6'6" Jared Bramthwaite if they can keep hold of him. So with those two giants at centre-back, Jordan Pickford behind them, and Sean Dyche as the manager, who did a really good job last season. If you look at the points deduction, without that, they would have finished higher. I think they'll be all right. In 14th, I've got Brentford, and for me, it's the same as usual, really, for Brentford. I think that a lot of people are tipping them to possibly go down, but what I do think is they'll probably keep hold of Ivan Toney, and despite the fact that he will then be moving on and won't be signing a new contract with them, if he wants a good move to a bigger club that can afford the sort of wages he's going to want, he needs to put in some stellar performances this season. So I do think that we'll see him do that. Also, they've got a really good manager in Thomas Frank, so I can't see him being in the relegation mix like a lot of people think they will be. In 13th place, I've got Wolverhampton Wanderers. Now, I think everyone, and most significantly myself, very much underestimated just how good Wolves could be under Gary O'Neill last season. When I made my predictions, I said that they could even get relegated or be dark horses for relegation, but that was before Lopetegui had left. Things looked rocky, FFP was not good, and to be honest, I wasn't much more confident once Gary O'Neill came in. But despite having a lot of points ripped away from them by VAR, I actually thought Wolves were decent last season. And I think if VAR decisions had gone their way that should have gone their way, they could have finished in the top 10 last season. But for me, every day above water is good enough for a club like Wolves in the Premier League, as arrogant as that may sound. And I think their Premier League survival and status is the most important thing. When you look at the fact that they've lost Kilman and they've lost Neto, and they might not be able to go and replace them because of FFP, for them to have another season in the Premier League, pull off some good wins, have some good moments, maybe have a cup run, that would be enough for Wolves fans, in my opinion. In 12th position, I've got Fulham, and they are another team that people are tipping to have a bad season because of the loss of Paulinho, and I can't understate what a big loss that is. But they've brought in Emil Smith-Rowe. Now, I'm not going to hang my hopes on him. Well, I wouldn't be hanging my hopes because I don't really care either way. But I'm not going to say he's going to be a world beater. But at the same time, he could really rejuvenate his career at Fulham. And I think if he was to do that, then you look at the talent they've got in that squad and they should be alright. You know, Muniz, Pereira, Robinson, he's a really good player. But most importantly, stability is a big thing. And they've got one of the longest serving managers in the league now, haven't they? So if you look at Fulham this season, with Marco Silva. He turned down the option to go to Saudi as well. Remember that. I think that he has got big plans for them, and I think he does feel like he can push on with this squad. I still do think they'll invest a little bit. Tossing Adarabioyo, they lost him as well. You know, he will be a big loss for them. But I think Fulham will be all right. 12th position, the Cottagers will be happy with that. In 11th, I've got Brighton. They fell off a little bit last season, and when I look at Brighton and I look at the fact that they do consistently sell their best players, they bring in new ones, try and sell them on, although no one's transfer value from last season really went up all that much. I look at the team that are propping up the bottom of this table for me in Southampton, and I do kind of worry for Brighton and say you can't consistently keep doing that, and not fall off. The difference is when Southampton were constantly selling their players, they weren't bringing in new good ones all the time, and they were signing other players that were a little bit older and whatnot, whereas Brighton do still have some quality there. You would imagine that they will be able to score goals. They have got a good attack. Obviously, João Pedro, a great player. But here's the concerning thing. Their new manager, who some people, the football hipsters, are saying, he's brilliant. You obviously didn't watch much of the Bundesliga 2 last year. No, I didn't, actually. I have a life. But their new manager, he's 31 years old. That means he's a year older than me. That means that he was probably on Bebo and MSN. And maybe even Pixo, and definitely MySpace. He probably knows who Tom off MySpace is. That is how young this man is. He probably played with Pokemon. Do you know what I mean? So, I don't know. I've never seen a manager that young be able to really, really achieve wonders. I know that there's a few young managers in the league, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't think they're going to fall off all that much. Let's see how they get on. But I think 11th place for Brighton's fair. Right, 10th position, I've got Crystal Palace. And okay, I get it. A lot of you lot are going over the top on Crystal Palace. You're really high on Crystal Palace. And I think they're really good as well, you know. I'm not saying they're not at all. Glasner was immense when he came in. And the run they went on towards the end of the season that saw them get a top 10 finish was really impressive. They smashed Aston Villa and Man United in the running. They've obviously lost Michael Elise. But for the moment, while the transfer window is still open, for the moment, they have retained Eze, Adam Walton, Gahey for the second. They're linked with Trevor Chalobah. They got Mateta up top. Cheek Decore, Ismail Assar they've brought in. So I do think that Crystal Palace will have a really good season. I think 10th place is probably their highest ever Premier League finish, isn't it? Where they finished last season. I think they finished there again this season. They're going to do well, but I wouldn't go that far over the top to say that they're going to get a European spot. In 9th, I've got West Ham. And this is where I will go over the top, ladies and gentlemen, because I have always really, really rated Lopetegui. I think he's a great manager, and I think that despite me saying that David Moyes wasn't given the credit that he deserved as West Ham manager, Lopetegui may well be one that on the eye is a little bit more pleasing to the fan base. Then you look at the fact that they can now boast a centre-back pairing of Todibo and Kilman. You want a bit of backup for that? You got Kurt Zuma in there, Ward-Prowse, you've got Edson Alvarez, you got Kudus, Bowen. Oh, God, I'm probably forgetting loads more. They've just signed Falkirk as well. They've just signed Somerville. Is it Somerville from Leeds who was really good last season? They've got some good players, man. Paqueta, Wan-Bissaka, they've just signed him as well. I'm pretty sure they have, or if Palace signed him back. I'm sure West Ham have signed him. They'll be good. They'll be good. And if there's any team in the Premier League this season who are going to look at Aston Villa from last season and think, do you know what? We should be ambitious enough to aim to do something similar to that. I think it's West Ham. I genuinely think it is West Ham that should be looking to do that. Depends, let's see if they get off to a good start or not, but I think West Ham could have a huge, huge season domestically, albeit I haven't even actually put them to qualify for Europe in 9th, have I? But they could surprise me is what I'm saying. Note them down. I'm sure you're all making notes, aren't you, right now, of my shit predictions. Note them down as my possible surprise package. Right, 8th position. I have got Aston Villa. Now, Champions League football absolutely killed Newcastle last season. And despite Aston Villa finishing 4th while having to contend with Conference League football, I don't know if lightning will strike twice and they will be as lucky. Should I say lucky? It wasn't luck, was it? They're really, really good. I don't know whether they can do it again this season. What I do know is the loss of Douglas Luiz is huge. But the signing of Onana from Everton and Ian Maatsen from Chelsea are also huge. They'll probably still do even more business. And when you look at them in the Champions League, right, they could possibly get out of the group. We don't know what their group's going to be like yet, but they've got a European competition exceptional manager, I should say. Couldn't get my words out there, could I? That will be guiding them through it. So I do think that in Unai Emery, they will probably go a little bit deeper than maybe Newcastle did in the Champions League last season. I think that will benefit the fans and what the fans want to see, but I don't know if it will benefit their domestic form. Do you know what? As I'm looking at it now, I'm thinking, hold on, should I put them higher? Because they are really, really good. But in my head, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking like 4 points or something could separate maybe 8th place and 5th place. So I don't think it's that bad if they were to finish just down there a little bit on what they did last season. In 7th, this is where I'm now kind of wishing I had gone with Aston Villa, but actually I'm going to stick with what I went with, and that is Man United. Now, the fans will love the fact that the Glazers are now out, and that will immediately lift spirits, as it did for Newcastle when Mike Ashley left, you know. The only difference is Mike Ashley actually left and the Glazers still own Man United. But we won't talk about that. Let's not get into that. But here's what I do know. Despite me being impressed with 1 or 2 of the signings, and they've definitely upgraded defensively, and Kobe Mainoo is an absolute baller, and maybe Rashford might have an on-season rather than an off-season, and maybe Højlund might start coming to fruition and might be able to chip in with more goals than apparent flop Nicholas Jackson in the Premier League last season. Ten Hag is gone by Christmas. The football they played last season was boring. It was awful. You can put it down to injuries, but they relied on individual brilliance. They were counter-attacking all the time. I can't say anything because Chelsea didn't win a cup and they did. So fair play to them. But I do think that Ten Hag's gone by Christmas. What happens then? I think Ruud van Nistelrooy ends up coming in, caretaker manager, does a good job, plays a lot more attractive on the eye football, ends up getting a full-time job, and then we possibly see Man United push on the season after that. But as for this season, I think it's going to be another transitional one for Man United. In 6th position, I've got Spurs. I think the signing of Solanke is a really, really good one. You can go and spend that money on someone who hasn't played in the Premier League, who might be more highly touted and might be a more sexy name. I mean, Dominic's not a very sexy name, is it? But you could go and spend it on Dominique from the French league, who looks terrific, but he doesn't guarantee you Premier League goals. And Dominic Solanke guarantees you Premier League goals. And I think that will be a massive benefit for Spurs this season. They've also signed Archie Gray, who's a really good player, very, very versatile. And they haven't lost anyone decent, which is probably more important. I think Ange will have adapted his tactics a little bit to suit Premier League football a little bit more. Maybe he won't admit that, but I do think his first season, he'd have learnt 1 or 2 things in this league. However, I do think that in that Europa League competition, even though it's Spurs, they should go deep. They'll have a lot of games. I don't think they'll have enough to finish above 6. But let me just remind you, with all the, influx of money and everything that's come into football, 6th now is the equivalent, in my opinion, to finishing 4th 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, when Spurs were finishing 4th, they were having open-top bus parades for that. So the Spurs fans should be happy with 6th. In 5th position, I've got Newcastle. And this is the season where Newcastle come back, in my opinion. Their injuries and luck in general was horrific last season. I've heard a lot of people online, a lot of YouTubers claiming that they had an awful Champions League run and it was a disaster and this and that. And my response to that would be, I don't think those YouTubers watched Newcastle in the Champions League last season. I thought they were good. They smashed PSG. They were robbed against them away. Yeah, they lost twice to Dortmund, but that was a Dortmund side that went on to reach the final. And they had, a draw and a loss to AC Milan. Very narrow, Better teams have gone to Milan and not won. I actually thought they were really unlucky. And they did all that, by the way, in the Champions League in the group of death with a squad that was decimated by injuries. Eddie Howe managed to rally and pull some of his players together, and they probably played when they weren't even fit enough, and they just about got over the line and managed to not have a disastrous season last time out. Tonali's coming back. He will be like a new signing for him. Most importantly, they've kept hold of their key players, Anthony Gordon, Bruno G. They've obviously kept hold of Isaac. If any of that changes, their position, in my opinion, could change. But for now, they keep hold of those boys. They've been linked with some top players. Unfortunately for me, as a Chelsea fan, they've been linked with Madueke. I think he'd be a great player for him if he was to go there. Hopefully he doesn't. But I do think they'll get one or two more over the line. And I think Newcastle, and most importantly, Eddie Howe, will show his class and show why, in my opinion, he's probably the best English manager in the Premier League since Harry Redknapp, I reckon. Could I be wrong there? I don't know. You tell me in the comments. And by the way, that could mean that Newcastle end up back in the Champions League again. Because if it hadn't been for Man United, Man City, Arsenal and the rest of you lot fucking it up last season, fifth spot would have got us Champions League football. So if Newcastle were to get Champions League football again this season, Eddie Howe retains his job as manager. Maybe they can invest more money and then they go again. Fourth position. This is where it gets interesting, ladies and gentlemen. And I don't think it's going to take a genius to know where I'm going with this. I am putting Chelsea Football Club fourth. And I know what you're thinking. Typical Chelsea fan, he doesn't realise that his club's fallen off since Roman Abramovich left, and all these teams that I've put Chelsea above are way better, and I'm just making myself look stupid here, but I think you're stupid, actually. No, I don't, probably a bit far, but what I'm saying is, look at the quality we have. Look at the quality. We've added one or two. We've done some smart business, to be fair, like tossing Adebayo and a free. I think that's a good one. Obviously, Pedro Neto, if you can keep him fit, I think he'll be a good one. But then look at the likes of Caicedo, who came good, Marc Cucurella, who came good, Cole Palmer. We are going to be good next season, I'm telling you. If Enzo Maresca can fix the defence and he can make sure that we're not exposed, we will finish in those Champions League spots, I do believe. What you've also got to remember with Chelsea, right, is a lot of people's perception of how we will do this season is swayed by how the media are portraying Chelsea this season. And I understand it. Chelsea's behaviour in some instances has been disgusting in the way that we've treated Trevor Chalobah, Conor Gallagher, and the media are running with that narrative and thinking that that will then translate onto the pitch. And sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't, Fergie was winning titles under the Glazers at Man United, and I'm saying that in Enzo Maresca, I do believe we've got a manager who could potentially push us on, maybe a little bit more even than Pochettino did. If Pochettino hadn't got off to a bad start, we'd have probably finished in the top four last season as well. So as much as you can say we've fallen off, we have fallen off from the Roman era. I understand that. But last season, we were only a tiny little bit away from finishing in that top four anyway and getting Champions League football. And this season, now the boys are gelled together. For the most part, they're with the same players, but Romeo Lavia and Kunku coming back from injury will be like new signings. I think we'll be even better than last season. We will finish in the top four. Right, third place is Liverpool, and this could either go one way or the other. Arne Slot has never managed in the Premier League. They've got somewhat of an aging squad. A lot of players running down their contracts as well. Van Dijk, Mo Salah, Trent Alexander-Arnold, all in the final year of their contracts, and that could suggest that if they don't sign new deals, well, it wouldn't suggest they will be leaving if they don't sign new deals, but it could suggest that maybe they're coming towards the end and they're willing to sail off into the sunset. So they could fall right off. And it could be almost like when Fergie won the league in his final season at Man United, and then they fell right off the next season. You looked at it and you realised the miracles he was achieving there with that squad and with the talent he had at his disposal, which was limited in comparison to what Man City, even Chelsea, had at the time. This could be one of them situations with Liverpool. They could fall off and you could go, Jurgen Klopp was overachieving. But actually, I don't think they will. And I think that the safest bet in this whole table of predictions is Liverpool to finish third. That means that in second, it is Arsenal. Now, if Arsenal were a horse, you would be backing them to win this, by the way, because you'd be looking at the form book and you'd be thinking, this horse gets a little bit better each race. Every race, they seem to get a little bit better, a little bit better, and a little bit better. And therefore, you'd think that they could eventually overtake the horse that keeps winning the race in Manchester City. But, as boring as it is, I do think that Pep City will be able to accumulate more points over a 38-game season than Arsenal do. And for that reason, it means that in first, I have Manchester City. And to quote Nigel Farage, boring. It is boring. Either way, by Christmas, we're going to know whether or not they're getting this points deduction. If they do get the points deduction, which I think they probably will, then Arsenal will win the league and everyone will probably be elevated up a place or something like that. But even if they get the points deduction, if it's like 80 points or whatever, yeah, they're getting relegated. But if they appeal it and get half of what they originally got, somewhat similar to what Everton did, then say it was like 40, 50 points, then, I don't know, they'll probably only finish, what, mid-table, just below mid-table, maybe just above the relegation zone. I don't really know, but either way, they're probably going to win the league. They're probably going to have that league stripped of them, or they'll go down in the table, and then Arsenal will win it. And Arsenal fans, you tell me, would you take a league title? Bearing in mind, you could say that City have cheated. If it was you in second, would you take a league title knowing that City technically won it and got more points than you? I don't know. I don't know whether that would sit well with me, but either way, here's what I do know. If we find out the results of the case by Christmas, right? By Christmas, then around that time, remember this Christmas, Aston Villa was still in the title race. So were Liverpool, right? Around that time, if one of Chelsea, Spurs, Villa, Newcastle, even Man United, someone like that are still in the title race, and all of a sudden the big dog in Man City gets taken out of it, and now it's between Arsenal and maybe Liverpool to fight for it, that might be enough incentivization to push one of these teams on, make them spend big in January with the feeling that maybe you could pull off a shock title win here. And if that happened and we ended up having a title race on our hands, oh my God, I would be absolutely buzzing. So people, there you go. There are my Premier League predictions. By the way, let's remember, probably none of them are going to come right. I am recording this before the end of the transfer window, which means there will be shifts and shapes to still happen, and it could dictate exactly how this Premier League season ends up panning out. But these are my initial thoughts. Let me know what you agree with. More importantly, let me know what you disagree with the most, and I will see you all in the next one.